Hey everybody, what's up? It's Etcetera Live. I'm your host, Kelly Barrett. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am beyond thrilled to have two of my favorite musicians from one of my favorite bands, Canada's premier musicians who have made a permanent footprint in the soundtrack of our lives, of a generation and now probably a new generation. Please welcome Canadian singer-songwriter Jay Semko and the longtime mega talented drummer of the Northern Pikes, Don Schmid. Is it Smid or Schmid?
Schmid.
Schmid. Awesome. Welcome, guys.
Yeah, welcome. Thank
Hey,
you.
Kelly. Good to be here.
It's good. Well, Don, it's nice to have you on. Jay's kind of an old friend of Etcetera Live. He's been here a few times, and it's nice to see you here with us tonight. I'm thrilled to have you guys on. I've been listening to you guys for years and years, and I'm always a fan of Saskatchewan bands because that's my hometown. And you and the Northern Pikes are part of a very elite group, which I have monikered the Fabulous 40s because it's a generation that fell in love with you in the 80s, and almost 40 years later, people are still in love with you and they still want to hear new music. They're still happy to go out and pay to see you, and they still want to know what's coming next. So how does it feel? How does that feel? And here's a question, and Jay, I'll ask you this first, and then Don, you can answer. Could you ever have imagined back in 1984 that some 40 years later you would still be out sharing your music with your fans?
No, to be honest. I mean, I thought I might be playing music if I was lucky enough to still be alive.
Right, right. Gotcha.
I mean, but no, with the Northern Pikes, I don't know, bands can be so fleeting. And I guess when the Northern Pikes started in 1984, we had all been in numerous bands previous to that, so you can sort of, and I think we all learn from that. You learn what works in a band, what doesn't necessarily work so well within the context of a band. And we had a lot, even though we were all in our early 20s, we had garnered a lot of experience by then because of the fact that we had gone out on the road. We had been in other bands and played a lot of gigs and that kind of thing, and done some recording as well, previous to that. So there was sort of a learning curve we'd kind of achieved already, but I didn't, I feel completely blessed and fortunate and grateful to be here and to be able to play music, with my best friends. And it's really just, it's pretty cool.
It's something. Hey, and Don, what is it like for you when, to still be performing in Lookout? And I would imagine that you see now, not just one generation, but I would imagine a couple of generations in there.
Yeah, well, that's true. There's a family out here in British Columbia nearby to where I live. Richard Tortorella is his name, and he has a couple of daughters that he brought out to our show in White Rock a couple of years ago. And one night he invited my wife and I over for a visit, and it was really cool to go there. And the younger girls, who were, I think, 10 and 12 at that time, they were like into the music. And I hadn't really experienced that besides my own nieces and nephews when they were younger. So yeah, it's a really cool thing to see when you see parents bringing their kids to the show. And like Jay said, I would have never thought, 40 years ago that we'd still be playing together. It's really quite amazing.
Right. Well, I think the 80s were just, to me, they were just the most magical time for music. The bands that came out of there that are still, around touring, and I don't want to dwell on this, but we do talk about it on the show quite often, is that I don't know if we'll ever see that generation again. I don't know. And there's a ton of great new music coming out. Don't get me wrong, but I feel so blessed to have grown up in that era and to be a part of it, where, the guests that I have on this show are people that I, have followed for years and idolized. And Jay, what do you think it is about the Pikes music that has this longevity and this mass appeal, then and still now?
Well, I think one of the main things is that we've always considered ourselves kind of a songwriting band. And I mean, that
Right.
we always put the song first, the song to serve the group or to serve the sound. And I think that's a real big part of it. I mean, it just being able to feel confident in your material and to know that you've got good songs. And I mean, I look at the band, we've always been oriented towards that. And I mean, I look at, like, for instance, we always wanted to get Don in the band. He was kind of in and out because because of his personal life, was not able to really come out and play with us for the first couple of years we were around. And, we had some other drummers and tried some other drummers, and a lot of them were really great. And they were great. A lot of them were great people and great musicians. But the thing with Don that I always loved, and I played him with him in previous bands, to the Northern Pikes, was he was very much a song drummer. He understood songs, and it was really interesting for me to watch the newest, the Beatle documentary that's happened, the Get Back, that that was released, I guess, within the last year, and watching when they were in the studio and kind of learning new songs and stuff, and how Ringo would just kind of, my dog's making a weird sound. Oh, he popped into a Walmart bag. Okay, well, anyway, but and just watching how Ringo, who was very much a song-oriented drummer, would listen. He'd kind of listen. There's a skill involved with that. Because all of us as humans, our instinct is to just get in there and start doing it sometimes. And if you're a little bit more relaxed and smart about it, you're listening to the things. And so you're listening to what everybody's doing. And I think that's something that we learn through experience along the way. And I think, and the other thing is, we did have about a 6.5, almost a 7-year break in the middle there, where I really wasn't thinking we would play music again, but it was meant to be. A lot of the stars lined up and we were able to get out and play more music again together. And I just really think it's one of those things where, sometimes it's right place, right time, right people that you're working with. And the fact that we are a live group and we've continued, even though, excuse me, we have had some hiatuses along the way. We've never really stopped playing completely, other than that break in the middle there, so
right. That was back in 93, wasn't it? Kind of like in 1993.
Yeah, 93 to 99 we basically were off, and then but since really since then, since 99, we've continued to play pretty consistently ever since. So when you look at it, I mean, that's, my math is terrible, but I think that's, what is that, 23, 24 years now, almost a quarter of a century, really, since we started playing again for the second time,
Right. And Don, when you come back, do you have a sort of a newfound appreciation for it? Is it kind of like almost sometimes you need a break from it to realize that you actually want to come home?
Oh, I think so for sure. And like, we often say that we broke up to save our friendship, which in a lot of ways, I think that's possible, because you spend so much time together, 4 guys, as we were 4 guys in the band, and with some crew people, and you're touring around, you're literally spending more time with them than your family. And so, and then you start to have family, like children start to come around, and, people's lives change, and it's really hard to get on a bus or get on an airplane or a van and start leaving home again once you got, responsibilities. So that was the main reason why I couldn't play with the Pikes when they started in '84. I really wanted to badly, but I had a daughter who was 1 year old at the time, and I just couldn't go to making no money. I mean, that's the reality that a lot of people maybe don't know, is when you start a band, and it's probably the same now as it was back in the 80s and the 70s. You just don't make much money at all.
Right. I would say it's worse now because there isn't the gigs out there that.
Yeah.
Back when.
Yeah, I think so too. And same with, like, we had a record deal where we were kind of one of the last to have a proper record deal. That nowadays they're so different. It's all about streaming, and it's just, you just can't sell physical product that easily anymore.
Right. I refer to it, Don, as the kind of like the new assembly line in music, because, back in the day, and, I sound old when I say that, but back in the 80s and the 90s, when there was just this magic happening, it was something to record an album, and it was unique and special, and there was this prestige to it. Whereas nowadays it's like this assembly line of music. Mm-hmm. That just keeps coming, from everywhere. Anybody can put an album out and stuff like that. And so you joined the band in '86, is that correct?
Yeah.
So you're one of the other longtime members as well as Jay.
Pardon?
You're one of the other longtime members.
Yeah. Well, Brian Potvin, who's
he's been there for a long time too.
From the beginning. Him and Brian and Jay really, I guess, from what I understand, started the band with Merle. And Merle, Jay, and I played in the Idols, and so it all goes back in time, where Jay and I have actually been playing together now for 43 years, which is really quite.
That's incredible.
It is incredible, yeah. 1980, we made our first recording in Rosetown, Saskatchewan.
I've been to Rosetown. I played somewhere. I did my time on the road too for 23
Yeah.
years in a rock band, and I remember Rosetown for
Well,
some
there you go.
reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, who are some of your earlier drummer influences?
Well, Ringo for sure. And
Yeah,
like
Jay mentioned Ringo.
in all his simplicity, yet still complicated. I mean, it's actually, whether to play like Neil Peart, which is very complicated, or Ringo, which sounds very simple, but it's almost equally as hard to, like Jay was saying, you tend to want to just play real busy all the time. It's kind of, I guess, human instinct. But the important part in being a musician, I think, is really, like Jay said, listening to the other people. What are they playing? And sometimes it means you don't play anything just for the space,
Right. Which is
a lot
just
of
as important, right? Just as important,
just
knowing
as
when to hang
important to
back. Yeah.
leave space as to fill up space.
Right.
Like if you don't have anything good to fill it with, then maybe just don't, and
Right. Yeah.
usually it works that way. But a lot of Canadian drummers, Robbie Bachman, BTO, Tommy Stewart, the drummer with Trooper, the original drummer, Jerry Mercer with April Wine. I kind of grew up listening to CKOM in Saskatoon, which was real straightforward top 40 music. And in 1980, when I met Jay and Merle, they introduced me to a whole British sound of music. Even the Police were just starting to break in late 70s. I'd heard a bit about them, but not a whole lot.
Right.
Joe Jackson, Squeeze, XTC, The Jam. There were so many groups that I had never even heard of, and the drumming style and a lot of that music was really quite different. It was a different thought process, and that was really helpful to learn and play those songs. A lot of different drummers, though, really influenced me. From hard rock drummers, Neil Smith, the drummer with Alice Cooper, the original drummer with Alice Cooper. I was big into him. The Who, Keith Moon, obviously, John Bonham, Led Zeppelin. Yeah. And a lot of local people too that were, as I started to, there was a guy in Saskatoon who Jay knows, Glenn Enns, is a good friend of ours. I used to go watch him when I was 16 years old, and he was doing triplets and things that I thought, okay, I understand. I can see that. I know how to do that now, but just listening to it, you kind of wouldn't necessarily know. So yeah, visual is a good learning thing, I think.
Right. Good stuff. Jay, who would you say your early influences were?
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm going to take a wild guess. I'm going to take a wild guess here. Were you a Bruce Cockburn fan?
Yeah.
Yes. In fact,
I don't know how I knew that, but
I really like Bruce Cockburn. I saw him in concert, I guess, earlier this year, just solo acoustic, and it was just a great show. I'm sure I bored my bandmates with me. Every time I see them, I go, "Oh, that was such a great concert with Bruce Cockburn." So they're probably sick of me saying that, but it really was. It was really good, and I thought he was his connection with the audience was great. He's just a great songwriter and just such a huge catalog of great music to choose from. And I'm a fan of songs and hearing them stripped down and hearing what things sound like without necessarily the ornamentation of a full group and a full completed recording. So when you can hear somebody just solo acoustic, I really dig that. That's really a cool thing for me, especially to hear somebody like Bruce Cockburn, who's just a great musician and songwriter in so many different ways. And early influences, I don't know. I think a lot of the same ones Donnie was talking about. I think and then really what changed for me, I guess, was I was in well, first of all, I can remember when my friend Parker Robinson had me over and played me the Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks. And that was whoa, that was like a complete changer for me because it just sounded different. It was such a kind of a, I don't know, sort of a snotty attitude, and the band had and it just rocked. I mean, it just rocks. That album is just, more than anything else, it's just a great rock record.
It's so rebellious. It's just so rebellious.
Well, yeah, and it sort of opened the door for me for a bunch of other things. And I remember there was CJUS FM, which was the college radio station, university radio station in Saskatoon that I guess transmuted itself into CFCR eventually, which is community radio now.
Right.
And there was also the commercial FM station, and I can't remember what the call numbers were, but there was a DJ named Peter Silversides. And I remember I went back to university. I'd graduated in 77, and then I just worked at various jobs and played in bands and did various things for the next year. And then I decided I better go back and try and get some schooling, which was, I did it. I stuck it out for the year, but I was never really never really that into it. But because I'm such a procrastinator, I would quite often end up staying up all night to finish papers and things like that. And back then I smoked, and I can remember drinking like 15 cups of coffee and smoking 15 cigarettes. And the radio would be on, and Peter Silversides did the night shift kind of from midnight to 6 a.m. And he played all this really different music for me at the time. And included in that were bands like Donnie had mentioned, like Squeeze and Graham Parker and the Rumor and Joe Jackson and the Police and just stuff that was really Elvis Costello, things that have become more kind of mainstream now, but at the time they were considered fairly alternative, and it just opened my mind to a lot of different kinds of music, and it sort of won me over, and I guess shortly after that I started kind of playing music with Merle, and yeah, it was just a natural evolution. But for bass, it's interesting. I mean, I love Paul McCartney. He's just an amazing genius of a bass player. I think he's still really, really underrated as far as a bass player. I mean, he just gets so many amazing bass lines and riffs, and such a well of imagination there. But I sure like I like Sting. Another big influence for me was Bill Wyman, and I got this CD the other day. Yeah, I know CDs. It's forgotten.
Old school.
And I got it, and it's kind of like it was like a more current. I can't remember what the name of the album is, but it was a more current version, and there were some different recordings on it. It wasn't their new album, but it was like a live thing, and they had big pictures of Keith and Mick and Ron and Charlie, and no picture of Bill. And
What the hell?
What happened to Bill Wyman? I would have to say he's a big influence on me. I love Bill Wyman's drumming, and I love them as a rhythm section. Charlie Watts, Bill Wyman, just a pretty cool rhythm section. And those recordings are they can sound very simple on the outside, and when you really dig into them and you listen to especially the drumming of Charlie Watts, and everybody did. I remember, when he passed away, every radio was playing all these Rolling Stone songs, and a lot of different ones, and a lot of big hits, and also obscure songs. And I started noticing a lot of just really things I hadn't noticed before with the rhythm section between Charlie and Bill. And I mean, so. But
Charlie was just such a chill drummer. He always just looked like, not overly flashy, but solid as hell.
Yeah.
And he just always had this, like, I'm just chilling, I'm doing my thing. And you're right. What a great rhythm section. And I think the fact that you both have such a wide variety of inspirational people in your past, and I'm going to jump ahead to the album here, because what I was about to just say is, does it ever show on the new album? And I really want to talk about Time to Time, which is the June of this year release. I'm just going to take a quick second and give a shout out to my show sponsors, Writers and Rockers Coffee Company. Have you guys heard of that? It's Rockstar endorsed coffee. So tonight I decided to show Queen City Kids dance.
Good friends of ours.
Yeah. Well, it's a Saskatchewan night.
Yeah, there you go.
So yay, Saskatchewan. Yeah. So super grateful to have them on board. What great Christmas gifts, hey?
That's
so nicely packaged.
Oh,
yeah. Rockstar endorsed coffee blends, and they've got mugs. I got a Todd Dammit Kearns mug, Writers and Rockers here.
Cool.
And
yes.
Check it out, people. www.writersandrockerscoffeecompany.com. Let's talk about the new album. I spent the entire weekend listening to it. So the album, as the viewers know, is an amazing stripped down acoustic collection of the classic hits from the Snow and June album, and as well as 3 new songs. And the thing that I love most about this album, guys, is the dynamics on it are incredible. That there's the energy of the classic hits and the new ones. Like Taken. Oh my God, I was listening to Taken over and over, and that song is just hauntingly beautiful. It's obviously got a very deep meaning. And does somebody want to tell me what the meaning behind that song is?
Well, Taken is a song. It's essentially written by Kevin, You know, Kevin Kane, who is our newest member, he joined
So
officially back in 2017. And
Kevin from Grapes of Wrath.
yes, and he's
Yeah,
still, the
yeah,
Grapes of Wrath are still going and still
yeah.
playing. And so, you know, that added, you know, we were in a bit of a limbo land for a while there. We sort of, for a little while, we had Ross Nikiforuk playing as our fourth person, who was kind of our, I guess, hired gun keyboard player for a number of years. He had played on the Neptune record and toured with us for a few years. And then we went and played as a trio for a while, and it never felt right until we, you know, because Merle stopped playing with us in 2005. So we
Right.
were kind of juggling things and trying to figure out. And then when Kevin came in, it was just such a natural thing, because he's a great guitarist, and he's you know, in terms of vocals, he's a great singer and harmonizer, and he's got a higher vocal range, sort of not exactly the same kind of thing as Merle, but it kind of fit, you know, it just, everything just fit so well. It was such a natural fit. And he's a great songwriter. And I mean, you know, it's just such a an amazing privilege to have him in the band. And I can't tell you really what that song is about, but I will say that we did an interview not that long ago, and Kevin had said that that was a song that he kind of had in his in his uh in his bag of songs that had not been
Right.
utilized yet. So he'd had it for a little while. So I don't think it was written necessarily that recently, you know, before the album. But I mean, I don't think that really matters. The song, I know exactly
It's
what you're saying.
timeless. Yeah.
Well, you know, I think we've got to give some credit to John Adams too, at Stonehouse Sound in Mahone Bay. We did the whole record in Nova Scotia, and John co-produced the record with us. And just, I don't know, he's kind of a little bit of a less is more kind of person in the studio, you know, and not that he's against us, you know, adding parts or making things a little more complex, but, and I think what came to Taken, I just love the fact that it's just really, there's a sparseness and a haunting quality. You know, it's interesting.
I call that song, I refer to it as hauntingly beautiful. I had shivers, like it gives me shivers, and I like, it could make me tear up. And there's a lyric in there, it must be nice in paradise upon a higher plane where no one knows a thing. And I'm thinking, is he talking about heaven? And I mean, it's all open to perception, of course, to the listener, right? But I took it as, it's just such a deep, beautiful song, and it, you know, like again, the dynamics on this album are incredible.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just it's
And Don, one of my questions was, sorry, Jay, one of my questions was
okay.
going to be, what type of different dynamic did it add when you brought the fourth member on, when you brought Kevin on? And Jay, you touched on it. Did it change the dynamics?
Well, actually, I vocally, I suppose, because everyone has their own voice, and
Right.
Kevin's fits in well, but it is different than Merle's. So that's probably the biggest change I think people would notice. But you know, it goes back to Jay mentioning earlier drummers that they had in the band, and I know all of those guys, and they were great drummers and everything. But there's something about chemistry, like either it works or it doesn't, and it's hard to explain even really what it is. It just, you have to try it out, I guess. And for some reason with Kevin, it actually didn't never even seem like it was not working. It just kind of like he's, you know, he's smart enough to come prepared. He knew all his parts, which was helpful.
Yes.
You know, really it was. And we have a lot of similar interests. We're from the same era, give or take. He's a couple of years younger than we are. They're from Kelowna, the Grapes of Wrath. The Pikes are from Saskatoon, two western smaller cities where a lot of concerts would miss our city, and same with
Right.
Kelowna. So you're kind of, you grow up a lot in isolation of the big touring acts, which I think in some ways helped us in the sense that you kind of, you form your original sound a little more purely because you're not really influenced as much. Because, and if you think, it's hard to think back for people now because television, I mean, even cable in those days, there was the Midnight Special or Don Kirshner's rock concert. There wasn't
Yeah.
a lot of places on television where kids could see live music. Really, back in like in the mid 70s, it was hard to find. So, you know, starting out in a band in grade 8, it's like you don't have a lot to really go by other than just the sound of music, you know. So, yeah, Kevin fit in. It's getting back to that. I mean, for me, it didn't seem to be any problem at all. he played the first gig. We didn't really even do that much rehearsing, if I recall. We trusted enough in him. Plus, he had played with Brian. They had a duo called, and they still do, called Kane and Potvin. So they played a lot together. So that helped. When Kevin came, it's like he did have a good insight into what we were doing. And plus, we played multiple shows with the Grapes over the years. So we got to hang out, and so yeah, it felt like a really natural progression.
I was just going to say a natural progression, yeah. And so, Jay, would you say the writing process has changed? How do I put this? Like, obviously, from back then to now, as you know, as we're all like kind of in a new season of life, has the writing process changed at all for the band?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, well, when I look at, time to time, and I happen to have the CD right there.
Look at it, there it is.
Well, I mean, I can look at these songs. There's 7 songs from the album Snow in June. When we originally went to record this album, the goal was to have it released in 2020.
For 30-year anniversary, right?
Yeah, 30th anniversary kind of tribute to Snow in June. And obviously COVID happened and it delayed things and it took us a little while to complete the record. So it really didn't come out till earlier this year. But I look at those songs, the 7 that are done, and I look at the 3 new ones, and they all kind of fit in their own way. Like nothing seems out of sorts.
No.
It's interesting to take a look at, when you get a second crack at a song, like looking at, songs we played, and some of them we've played a lot live. I mean, we've played Dream Away and She Ain't Pretty and Girl with a Problem and Snow in June. I mean, we've played those songs many, many times over the years. So I can revisit them for a new recording with the concept being that we wanted to kind of strip the songs down and maybe make them a little more theoretically, a little more kind of singer-songwriter versions of the songs. But as the Northern Pikes do, we always put more into it than that. So it ends up being, even though some of the songs are relatively sparse, there's definitely a complexity within the simplicity of the songs, if you know what I'm saying. And when you get to dig in on them and do them again, and plus, we added a couple of musicians for the recordings too, and we had Glenn Patcha playing keyboards on a number of the songs, and it was just kind of a good combination of events. Brian and Kevin both live in Nova Scotia, and Glenn had moved back there relatively recently, was what I understood. And he'd been living in New York, and he had a little bit of time off before going out to tour with Bonnie Raitt as her keyboard player.
Oh, wow.
And I think they're still out on the road. And in fact, I saw there's new dates coming up next year in 2024. She's doing a very extensive tour, and Glenn is her keyboard player. It was really kind of cool to see him on the Tonight Show and things like that,
Yeah.
Hey, there's, and stuff. And he had a really, a little extra, not necessarily definable thing, but something that definitely takes the songs to another spectrum. And I think it was, and I'm trying to remember, it was Donald. I'm trying to remember Donald McLennan, yes,
Yeah.
who played fiddle on a few of these, and from Halifax. And Donnie and I weren't there for those. For Donald's sessions, he came in and overdubbed the fiddle and or violin. It depends on what you want to call it. My grandfather played the violin, and he hated it when it was called a fiddle.
Blasphemy.
No, it's a violin.
Well, it's really prevalent in the Things You Saw in Me, the fiddle.
Mm.
And it really adds a really cool, it almost sounds Nova Scotia-ish. It just lends a really cool folk. And that's what I'm talking about, the dynamics. From the classics, from the Snow in June album to Taken, which is just this chilling, deep, beautiful, hauntingly beautiful song. And then the Things You Saw in Me, which is more of an upbeat, kind of a folky tune with the, and I was like, is that a fiddle or is that a violin? Because depends on how, because I was really trying to hear, and I thought I heard some banjo in there too.
Yeah, Kevin played banjo on some of the songs.
Yeah, and I thought how cool that was. And then there's Only a Lover's Dream, which has these super cool, mysterious, sort of sultry spoken word verses. Is that your voice, Jay?
That's me. Yeah, it was essentially just kind of a poem that I I'm kind of singing. I was trying to kind of sing a melody in the low register part of the first part of the song, but it comes across more as me just kind of talking, because I think it was so low that I couldn't really get a melody out of it. And then
That's a
later on,
sexy voice. I got to tell you, Jay, that's a sexy
oh,
voice. I was
thanks.
like, because it sounds very different than any other time I've heard your voice. I was like, damn, that's sexy. But that's
well,
really
I'm an ex-smoker now, but I knew my 30 years of smoking would eventually
would
come
pay
in
off.
handy.
Yeah. Speaking of, Jay and I are both sick tonight. Well, I don't know about you, Jay, but we're getting sick. So pardon the cough, pardon the barking.
Bit of a fog in the throat here. That's sort of...
So, and Don, your drumming on this album is described as kinetic and creative. And I would imagine that doing these scaled down versions might be a little different from what you were used to doing. And it kind of goes back to what we were just discussing with, sometimes holding back is dynamic and knowing when to hold back. And did you find it a challenge to do that, or was it just part of being kinetic and creative?
Well, no, it was a challenge. It usually always is, and it was almost more so this time because going back from a rock version of, say, Dream Away to what we did with it, it's like a 180-degree turn. And yeah, just trying to find out, like Jay said, you try to listen as a drummer, to the song. What does it need or what doesn't it need? And that's a skill in itself, just to know what to do, much less to how to do it. But I listen a lot to ambient music and instrumental music. So I listen a lot to different kinds of grooves that there's no vocals necessarily involved. So that experience, I think, was helpful to just draw from different thought processes and the way that you play the drums. And a lot of it's a lot quieter, and I use different sticks. Well, sometimes brushes. The things you saw for me is brushes, and some of the songs are multi-rods, which is like between a brush and a stick. It's like they're bamboo pieces that are put together, and those are the sticks. And those are really cool, actually. I like them because they have some give to them. So when you play them, even when you play harder, and on Shane Pretty, I actually used them as well, but just to not try to sound like a regular drum set. And I can hear it. I don't know if people would necessarily notice the difference, but it's kind of one of those attuned things when you're a musician. You kind of hear your instrument maybe better than other people would hear it, possibly. All the little idiosyncrasies that you're doing.
And the things you saw in me, it has kind of a neat shuffly sound, like just sort of a shuffle.
Well, that's hard.
I can definitely hear it. Like it's
And when we went to play that live the first time, I actually tried doing that, and it didn't work because it's studio and live are different. They are. And so you can anyway. I created the same kind of feel, but not really a shuffle, and I found it worked better. It's kind of rocks it a bit. It's almost like you could polka in a way to that song. It's kind of bizarre, the groove, the way it ends up being.
Right.
But it was hard to go back and try to redo the songs that, like Jay said, we've played them for 30 years, and to try to give them new meaning, new feeling. It's a really hard thing to do.
It's kind of like breathing new life into them, though, isn't it? A bit, because you've played these songs forever, and now you get to sort of play them in a different light and with a different dynamic. And I think it's a great way to pay homage to all the classics that that we love and still love, and that sort of made you guys who you are. And we're getting a ton of comments in, so I'm just going to pop over there. So Dave Sutherland is saying, hi, Don and Jay, good to see you. We met down in Moose Jaw when you guys played on Main Street. I think I had a Guild guitar that belonged to one of the members in the band. Thank you, Dave Sutherland from Kindersley, Saskatchewan.
Yeah, wow.
Hey, Dave.
Thanks,
Close
Dave.
to
Yeah. Fellow Saskatchewanite in the house, eh?
Yes.
My friend Darren Grussel says, love the Pikes music. Teenland is my favorite tune. Thanks for that. Do you guys have a favorite song? Jay, do you have a favorite song?
Boy, that's a good question. I mean, certain ones are always fun to play. I mean, who wouldn't like playing She Ain't Pretty? Canadian classic. We haven't sang the chorus for 30 years because the crowd always sings it, which is great.
Right?
But I mean, I still like playing Things I Do for Money. I still like the dynamics in there. And I think, and I'd have to say, I really like playing Snow in June. I always like playing that song. And maybe that's partly because I get to be just a bass player for the most of the song. I'm not really singing the lead vocal. I do a little bit of harmonies and stuff in there, but it's And plus, I love songs that kind of take you on a bit of a trip like that. And that's kind of a 3-part song essentially. And I really love the version we did on Time to Time. It's just pretty cool. And there's a cool video that we did, which Kevin put together, and I think that was a big part of this record too. I mean, I think both Kevin and John played a really important part, and to a lesser extent, Glenn and Donald. I mean, because that helps to bring some new life to these songs. Because obviously, Brian and Dawn and I were there from their inception back,
Right.
in the 80s when they were written and recorded, in 1989 and early 1990. That's when those songs were recorded for Snow in June. And, when you get just a little different perspective on it, it's sort of, anyway, you trust people that you work with, and we tend to do that. I mean, if you're going to spend that time together, so we implicitly trust Kevin, as I trust Brian and Dawn with, if I come up with a song idea, I trust that they're going to come up with interesting thoughts and ideas. And you were asking before with their songwriting process, how that may have changed. And I don't think it's really changed as much as there really is for me, that I have a lot of faith in the other 3 members of the group, that I can take a piece of music that I have and they'll know. They'll have interesting ideas, I can think of a few spots in the Forest of Love record for sure, where the songs, shifted gears or went in a little bit of a different direction than I would have thought of. And at first, change is always a little bit of an abrupt thing, and it's a little bit of a shocker to your system, especially if you're used to one particular thing. And then,
Right.
But then when you do it and somebody does that and it shocks the system, it's like, oh. And that's part of the real fun part about being in a band and being part of a group when you're in the creative process together. I just absolutely love that. I love working out the songs, and I really loved in the studio working out what we were going to do with the older songs and also with the newer ones that we had on Time to Time.
Right. And I'm curious, Don, maybe you can answer this. What was the motivation or the inspiration behind revisiting the classics and putting them on the new album in an acoustic? Because actually, weren't most of those songs from the Snow in June written on an acoustic guitar?
Yeah, I think they pretty much always are.
So it's not that much of a stretch. And I'm just curious because what a brilliant idea to take songs that people love and just breathe kind of new life into them. And I'm just curious where the inspiration for that came from, or the ideology behind that.
Well, the initial idea, I think we touched on it earlier a little bit, was 2020 was going to be the 30th anniversary of Snow in June, which came out in 1990 in June. So we thought, in 2019, it'd be really cool to just do stripped down versions, reimagined versions of 10 songs from Snow in June. That was the initial plan for this album. So we started in late October, November of 2019, started recording, went home for Christmas, and then by March of 2020, COVID had hit, which basically postponed our plans, canceled our plans, and then it pushed everything back by months and months and months, and as it did with everybody on the planet, really. So then it became a really, we did a lot of conference calling, the 4 of us, discussing do we do new songs? Because this record should have been done really quick. We wanted to release it in the spring of 2020. So starting in fall of 2019, that's the right amount of time for us to do a record. So it got delayed, and we had to cancel studio time. And then it became a question of, we should start thinking about recording a new album, much less just doing a new album of brand new songs. And so then we thought, well, why not just do mixture, some new songs, and we spend, I think, weeks, if not months, debating about whether that was the right thing to do on this record. Like, does it make sense, really, having 7 songs from an album 30 years ago and 3 new songs?
I think it makes perfect sense. Because it's just this potpourri of awesome songs. You get kind of a glimpse of the past, and then you get some new stuff too. And I'm a fan. And Michael Heddle says Pikes are hands down my absolute favorite band. We love the new album. Love.
Well, thanks, Michael. He's a good friend.
Oh, thanks, Michael.
Well, and that's what we hoped would happen, right? I mean, at some point, it doesn't have to make sense. And how do you even know if it makes sense in the first place anyway? So we thought, sure, we always are a band of doing new songs. So we thought, okay, let's just. And Jay wrote one, Brian wrote one, and Kevin wrote one, and kind of in theme of what we were doing acoustically, and they all just fit just perfect. It's like it it's seamless, really. And then actually then sequencing the album, that's the next question, is what order do you put those 10 songs in?
Right.
And it was Brian that came up with the order that we have. And I think it's brilliant. It just, having the 3 new songs at the end, it's like you say, it's a payoff in some ways for a fan who's been, anxious to hear these reimagined versions. And then there's 3 new songs. So I think it turned out good that way.
Right. I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan of it. Andy Christ. Hey, Andy. He says, Canada has claimed you as our own. What other countries have claimed you, and where else do you feel at home?
Well, the only place we've been off the continent is Japan. In 2006, I believe we went to Japan and played for the Canadian Embassy there, which is really quite a lot of fun. And we played a lot in the US. We toured many years down there. A lot of shows opening for different groups. Peter Frampton, we opened a tour for Peter.
Cool.
The odd one was Dred Zeppelin. If people don't know about Dred Zeppelin, it's a mixture of Led Zeppelin music with Elvis.
Oh, wow.
Elvis, the singer. It's very bizarre. And that's one of the interesting thing about the Pikes. We open for Robert Palmer. So we could go from Peter Frampton to Robert Palmer to the Fix to a couple nights with David Bowie to Dred Zeppelin. And
you played with David Bowie?
Well, 2 shows in front of Duran and David Bowie at the Cine in Toronto in August of 1987. That's the biggest show that we've ever done.
Excellent.
It was hard to believe when we actually got the call for that, because that is one thing that a record company can do for an artist, is get you shows like that.
Right.
Plain and simple. So it helped being on Virgin Records and Doug Chappelle at the time. And our management, Fraser Hill and Ed Scmid, we had 2 managers in those years. And it's a combination. You have a working team of people, and which is different now. We're doing a lot of it ourselves, and which a lot of artists are doing now. It's come right back to almost the beginning, where your Time to Time was an independent album.
Right. And I love to hear that it's this culmination of people making the album. It's not just 1 or 2 people. And I think maybe that's what gives it the flavor that it does, is there's all these influences. It's not just one guy writing and 1 or 2 guys. It's just this collective, effort. And, Jay, I was just curious because you're also an author, and you released the poetry and lyrics of Jay Semko, I think in March of 2022. My question for you is, do you think that the music fuels the writing of poetry, or do you think it fuels each other? Does it make it easier to write poetry when you bring your experience with songwriting to the table?
It's interesting. When I look at it, for me, when I write songs now, I tend to have little bits and pieces of word ideas, or sometimes little snippets of poetry that I might have written, or a few lines, and then I'll kind of put it down. It's sometimes I'll have it completed. I'll have like a whole, like a poem completed, and then I go, okay, musically, what does this kind of make sense? Can I make this kind of work? But more often than not, I think when I'm working, especially with the Northern Pikes, like I say, there's a give and take trust thing that happens when you can bounce your ideas off the guys and trust that they're going to have,
Right.
honest opinions and good thoughts about what, good ideas about what you might want to do. So from that point of view, it's really a case of just letting her rip. And sometimes that means just do it, just sit there and do it. And Donnie and I experienced that when we did Forest of Love. And I can remember there was a song that I had been kind of working on, and he was kind of there as I was thumping away and clipping away. And sometimes it's just trial and error and working at it and just doing it, And it's I don't know, what's the old saying, 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration, or something like that, which essentially is meaning, yes, you can get the raw ideas, but you have to work them out, and you have to figure out what you're going to do with that. And sometimes that takes editing, and it takes just some time. It's not that simple sometimes to get a completed song quickly. But when you work with other people who are experienced at doing that, as in the Northern Pikes, I find we can sew things up a lot quicker. And that would be one thing I would say that has really improved. Speaking for myself, and I would say probably for the group as well, is just we're much better self-editors than we used to be.
Right.
We know how to make songs.
John's agreeing. Yeah.
Yeah, how to get the best out of the song is something that we've learned, and it's an ongoing craft. I mean, you never conquer that. It's like golf; you'll never play it perfectly or something. Like
Right.
you'll just keep going and going and keep trying and trying and trying and working at it, and it's fun too. It just is. It's just a fascinating art, songwriting, and it's fascinating to put things together in the studio. And I mean, you can go pretty deep. We spent almost 6 months working on Snow in June. That
Right.
was a long time in the studio, chipping away at that. And having said that, we've done, I look at Forest of Love. That record was really less than 2 weeks of recording time. And,
Wow.
but it was done. But that's part of the difference with that experience factor happening, is that when we went in to do that record, that's, I don't know, almost 30 years later after Snow in June, essentially, and
Right.
you learn from everything you do, and you never really stop learning. And there's something really wonderful about working working with a team of people, and whether that be sometimes that's people like your management or your record label or your publicist or your booking agent, and there's probably others I'm missing along here as well, or a producer in the recording studio, and the engineer, and any additional musicians that may join you for that. And that's part of what makes it really kind of fun and interesting, is just that whole meeting of minds and throwing different ideas around and getting inside somebody else's brain creatively. I mean, working the creativity that somebody else has as well as your own. It's just so absorbing and deep, and I just absolutely love it. And that's why I really loved watching the Beatles working in the studio, and as I think gazillions of other people did, because just to see how did these people who made these great records and wrote these great songs and was arguably, the best, if not one of the best, if not the best rock and roll band ever. And I mean, what did they do? How did they do that? And I looked at that, and it was interesting watching, and I thought, they do a lot of the same things that we've done.
That you guys do.
Many other bands do, that every other band does. You try and learn the songs, you figure it out, you're joking around. Sometimes you kind of argue a bit and mix it up to try and figure out where you're going to go with it and what's going to happen. And it's all part of the creative process, and it's just a fascinating thing to go through. It just really is,
Right. Melissa Johns Gorman is saying she absolutely loves Time to Time, and she hopes to see you live out here in Vancouver. Is that a possibility?
Oh, I think so. In 2024. Yeah.
You guys, do you have a big tour lined up?
Nothing lined up now. We're thinking about what to do next, because we haven't really toured specifically on Time to Time. It's just kind of still coming out of the COVID situation, and you see people turning positive again now, and you kind of have to wonder, okay, just like, you got to take it all with a grain of salt. And we seem to go in cycles with our gigs. The summertime things just open up more. It's just the way it always is. The winter
Festivals and right.
We would like to do a theater tour again if we could. It's just hard, we did a 6-show co-bill with the Pursuit of Happiness exactly a year ago in Ontario last fall, and it was wonderful. And then you can, like, for one group such as us to play a theater tour across the country, it might sound simple, but it's, that's, you're expected to sell, almost sell out the theater every time, and it's a tough task to ask for. We haven't been on the radio a lot the last year, so it's just harder to fill up theaters. So when you do a co-bill with people like Pursuit or Barney Bentall, we've done shows with, even Grapes of Wrath we've done shows with. It just helps each artist to not have to rely on, selling out the theater. So hopefully we can figure something out for 2024, and we'd like to get out and play theaters again.
Yeah.
Co-bills are fun too. We've done a bunch of shows with 5440, and I mean, it just works really well, and it's fun.
That's a great match. That's a great.
That's a good match.
Yeah, it really has been. They're really cool guys. They're a great band, and I mean, it's just really it's worked really well for us, and I really love it too. And I mean, I can remember, I guess that was about 2 years ago, and we did a show, and it was our first kind of bigger show back, kind of in the late days of COVID, and we played in Winnipeg, and it was an outdoor thing in the summer, and they had to move it inside into Burton Cummings Theater. It used to be the Walker Theater. It's a great theater. It's haunted as can be.
Is
It's a
that
great,
right?
yeah. And but and that was with I remember that was with the Jim Cuddy band, and
And 5440.
and 5440, and there was another band. I think they were called the Trebles out of Winnipeg. And it was just so good. I felt such a great vibe, and I think everybody did. We were all so happy to see each other, and we all, we've all played gigs together in various forms over the years, and it was just like, oh, it was so nice to see people, and you just want to hug each other and go, oh, we're here, we're doing this again, and it feels so good, and we're
We're
all
amongst
still
friends.
alive, and we're still
Yeah.
making music, and it was just fun, and I feel a real. I guess I feel a camaraderie with people, kind of with any musician for that matter, really, because we all know the challenges that you've got to go through, and it's a pretty unique set of skills that you got to have, and a lot of unique challenges that you're going to face when you do that. But just the fact that we've been able to play gigs with people who have become really good friends, and I love playing with 5440, the Jim Cuddy band. They were they Baz and Colin and Jim, and it would be just great, just really great people, and you just really just feels good. It's just such a positive thing going on, and that's like, as Donnie was saying about a lot of our summer shows. I mean, that's where the last few years, the majority of our shows have been summer. We play at our own pace. We're not in our 20s anymore.
Right.
We're not into endless road trips and that kind of thing. We play when it feels good for us, and when we get good opportunities showing up for us, and it works out pretty good. But we're very spread out now. I mean, in the early days, of course, we were all in Saskatoon.
Right.
I'm in Saskatoon. I've lived in a couple places over the years, but this is where I've been for a number of years now. I'm Saskatoon. Donnie's in the West Coast, and
with no snow.
No snow. They've got green leaves, and Kevin and Brian are both in Nova Scotia. So, I mean, you couldn't be more spread out unless we had a fifth member that was at the Arctic Ocean, maybe.
Right. But what a privilege that is to still be out there doing what you're doing, but to be kind of doing it by your own rules and your own schedule and your own. Don, here's a question. I'll ask both of you this as we wind down here. What makes you happy these days? Like when are you? That's a great answer. When are you the happiest? Walking your dog.
Yeah, we love our dog. All of us in the band have dogs now, which is quite interesting.
I need a dog. Jays was walking into a Walmart bag earlier.
He's sleeping in it now.
What kind of dog do you have, Jay?
He's a miniature schnauzer.
You
want to come? Come here.
We've had dogs on the show before. And what type of dog do you have, Don?
We have a Sheltie. She's like a miniature lassie.
Look.
That's Remy. How you doing, buddy?
What's his name?
Remy. It's short for Rimrock, but he's always been called Remy.
Remy. Hi.
He said his birthday. He just turned 7.
How adorable. I love it. It's bring your pet to work day on Etcetera. Oh, what a pretty dog.
Roxy was sleeping, I must say. She's a bit tired.
Roxy looks unimpressed, but she's pretty.
Yeah,
what a beautiful dog.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I can honestly say we've had pets wander on, but we've never had 2 dogs on one show.
We're making history, rock and roll history.
Yeah. Jay, what makes you happy these days? When are you the happiest?
Oh, happiest. Geez, I guess one thing I've over the last few years that I've gotten, I guess, more involved in anything is I've been pretty upfront about my challenges with mental health and addiction, and and it might sound weird, but I enjoy sharing my story with people because I've had a positive response from others about that, and people that saying that, we really appreciate the fact that you're honest about this and you're sharing your story with us, and it helps, and so that makes me feel good to do that, But happiest, when I'm hanging out, I've been really busy this last couple of weeks, so tonight is the first night I've been actually not working in quite a number of nights, and So I'm going to enjoy, I think, maybe watching a football game with my dog and eating ice cream and Halloween candy, because I always
Good
buy
for you.
I buy it more for me than I only get like a few kids every year, but I always have to be well stocked just in case.
Right? Every year I like don't buy it to the last minute, and I waited till like Thursday last week, and I've already been through half of it. I'm gonna have to buy more for Tuesday night. Yeah, well, I like my sugar. So, well, you know what? We got to give some free stuff away before I let you guys go here. So, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Good Times Comedy Club Lethbridge here, who has graciously donated 4 free tickets to the first local person. This is something for the local viewers who can answer this skill testing question. And Don, you're going to ask the question for us.
All
I'll
right.
give you a drum roll.
The drum roll, yeah. I actually don't have my drums here, but the skill testing question is, from 1989, what is the name of the song that we were nominated for Best Music Video at the Junos?
There you go.
In the 1989 Juno Awards.
Yeah.
Right. 1989 is the key word, right? Yeah.
The album or the song is from Secrets of the Alibi. That'll be a bit of a
hint.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Don. Okay, the first person to answer that local person wins 4 free tickets. You guys, I just can't thank you enough for coming and Jay sharing your first night off with us, and Don for taking time to hang with us tonight. And is there a show coming up in November?
Yes.
November 9th in Estevan, right? And that's with Trooper and Sass Jordan.
Yeah.
So there you go. Everybody has to go to Estevan to see the Northern Pikes in the next little while.
That's right. November 8th. Sorry, the 9th. We fly on the 8th. We play on the 9th.
Yeah, I have it as November 9th, but yeah, and that's at Affinity Place. So that'll be something for the Saskatchewan folks to go to. And well, keep me posted on your upcoming dates for 2024, and I'll let the fans know. And once again, tell people where they can get the new album, because there's also a limited edition vinyl, like a marble vinyl album, and it's autographed. Is that correct? I think Don's got a copy of it there.
He's gonna find a copy there. You know, they're pretty cool, and they're all slightly different. This is what's so interesting about it.
So cool.
Yeah, it's very
retro.
Yeah. We signed the album jacket, not the vinyl itself.
Right.
Yes.
And where can people get those?
The best place to get them is on our website, which comes directly to me, and I mail them out to you. Yeah, it's very simple.
Okay, there you go, guys. Check it out time to time. Thank you guys so much for spending your time with us tonight. And once again, huge shout out to Writers and Rockers Coffee Company, Good Times Comedy Club. Have a great week, everybody. And join me next week, where my guest will be Michael Williams from Much Music fame.
Oh, cool.
That'll be interesting, right? Thank you guys so much. Take care. Thanks, God bless. All the best to you guys. Health, happiness, all things amazing to you all. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Kelly.
Okay.
Cheers.